So first and foremost, it's for me to say thank you and welcome to the presentation this evening in relation to secondary phase transfer. This is for predominantly families and young people who are currently in year 5 at this present time. And I know it feels like we're thinking about a long way away for secondary phase transfer, but believe me, it goes very quickly. And so what we wanted to be and what we try to be is very proactive in our approach to be able to ensure that we are helping you and your young people make those transitions as smoothly and as effectively as possible. There's lots of information today that we'll share with you. There's lots of information around process and procedure. There's lots of information around the law and your legal entitlements, etc. But what I would say is this is the first conversation of many that we will have as we take this journey together to ensure that your young person is given the right provision as they move forward into secondary. So if we can go through the slides, I'm going to take my pens out of my head. I just realized. Okay, so what we're going to plan to cover today is the agenda is meet the team. So some of my EHCP coordinators that you will be working with going forward on your journey are on the call today, and I will get them to introduce themselves at this point in time so that you can put a name to a face, because these are the people that will be helping and working with you, as will I going forward. We're going to talk about where we are now, so where we are now in the process and where we should be now and what that looks like. We're going to talk about the process, what actually has to happen in relation to a transfer for a young person with an EHCP going forward into secondary provision, and what steps we need to take. And we're going to talk about what happens next. Additionally on this, what we are also going to talk about is where you can get help, because actually we know that any transfer for any young person is a difficult sometimes and an emotional time. This is a big change for your young people. And so what we want to make sure is you get the right help at the right time to be able to manage and navigate that process. And as we said at the end, we've got question time for you to ask any questions or clarify any information if that would be of help. So first and foremost, I'm going to introduce the team just so that you're aware of who you'll be working with. We have some of the team here today, but some are unfortunately not with us, but we will make sure that we get an opportunity, if your coordinator is not here, that you get a chance to speak to them and meet them as the next part goes forward. So the the coordinators, sorry, that aren't here today are Nicola Lynch or Jodie, because unfortunately they're both not working at the moment. But I do have our other 4 case officers with us, and we do carry a vacancy at the moment within the team, and we are currently recruiting. So there will be some new staff joining the primary team, as well as we've just had some staff leave us. So if I can go down the list, Judith, could you just pop your camera on and say hello to everybody so we can see who you are?
I'm not sure she's online.
She's not on yet. Okay, I've sent a link so we can go from there. Diane, I can see you're here, so I'll get Di to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all.
Natasha, are you on?
I am here, but it will not let me join the camera. It says Fran has stopped my video because your host has stopped it. So let me come out and come back in a second.
Don't worry, Tash, if you just introduce yourself at this point, then we'll carry on. Thanks. That's great. And Doris.
Hi, I'm Doris Kizito. My camera as well just won't come on. It says the host.
So clearly there's some magic button.
Oh, there it is.
I've given permission back. I'm so sorry.
My video.
Thank you.
There we go. So I'm Doris Kizito, and I'm one of the EHCP coordinators. And
Tash, your camera's come on as well.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. I think the host, well, I don't think because we used Zoom, but I'm Natasha Laker. I'm an EHCP coordinator in Georgie's team.
Brilliant. So there's some of the team, but as I say, we will get to know you more as we start the journey together. Okay, as we move on. So what does this journey consist of, or where we are now? So currently your EHCP coordinators are starting to deal with phase transfers. This means that we'll be attending your Year 5 annual review that will either have taken place or will be taking place over the next 2 terms. So spring or summer coming up now. We will then at those annual reviews be updating and using the evidence that comes from all the outside agency reports, like the EPs or the OTs or the SALT, the school reports themselves, to amend your EHCP to reflect your young person now. Because what we want is a really up-to-date picture of how they're doing at school, but more importantly, what they're doing at school and what provision and support they need that will need to be in place for them to have a successful transition to secondary school. Based on that professional reports and advice, we will also be thinking about what type of school that might be. So are they going to continue in mainstream, or are they going to continue in specialist if they're in special school? If they're in mainstream, but we think that actually going to the mainstream secondary school would be too challenging, for instance, do we need to consider a specialist school at this point? All of those conversations will come from that evidence and what we're seeing from those reports and from your current schools, and most importantly from you as parents as well as the experts that know your children so well. So what we will do is triangulate all that information and update the annual review paperwork with updating the EHCPs so that we're able to have a really good solid plan moving forward that identifies the needs of your young person. We can go on. The Year 5 annual review will take place, as we said, and then we will amend the plans and update them. And then in July 2025, so I'm already into the summer holidays. I've had Easter, it was lovely, but now I'm moving into the summer holidays. So in July 2025, we will send you a letter, and that letter will suggest that we want your request for your parental preference of secondary school that you would like us to consider for your young person. This feels a long way ahead because we're not even considering placing our young people into secondary school until September 2026. But because of the way that the law works, we have to start this process at this time. So therefore, when we ask you for a parental preference, we are asking you for one preference of one school. And the reason that we ask for one preference is predominantly around mainstream schools. Because if we get to a position with our mainstream schools where we need to maybe work with them to take your young person in, we may have to challenge them in relation if they're coming back saying they can't meet need, but we think they can. The strength of a parental preference is very important. So what we need is we need to think about the fact that as a parent, you have the right to send your child, or you have the preference to send your child to the school you want. And we as a local authority have a duty to listen to that preference. It is not a legal right, and it doesn't mean that all the time we will follow that. But what it does mean is we're working together. And if for some reason we cannot do that, there will be a clear and strong rationale and understanding of why we're not doing that. And we will be working together on that. But your parental preference is really important. So we ask you to, in July, August time, write back to us in an email, or we will give you, you can tell us and we will confirm that in an email to you in writing what your parental preference is. We then consider these requests, as I said, and we look to do the consults from September 2025. If your young person has an EHCP, they will lead us to follow this process by writing out and consulting formally with our secondary schools. If your young person is at SEND support but doesn't have an EHCP, you must apply through the usual schools admissions process. But when you are looking at children with and young people with EHCPs, then we must apply through consultation. So we send out the documentation of the current EHCP, we send out the annual review paperwork, we send out any reports which or any additional information, which may be the appendices, and that goes to the school, and on that evidence is where they make their decision if they can meet need or not. We may send more than one consultation, we may send several consultations. If we're talking about specialist schools, We certainly may send more than one consultation. We are currently in a really difficult situation in Merton, but also nationally, where there is a significant shortage of specialist placements for our young people. And as a result of that, what we are trying to ensure that we are doing is getting our consultations out at the earliest opportunity in September and securing placements moving forward. But we do need to sometimes think about more than one school because of the limitation of the spaces in those schools available at this time. In February, on February the 15th, 2026, within the legal restraints of the Children and Families Act and the Code of Practice, we have to name your young person's school moving forward. Now, the reason we do this on February the 15th is that we, if you like, get first choice of those schools because the mainstream school pupils and other pupils without an EHCP get offered in March and April moving forward. So for us, this is a really important date in ensuring that if your young person wants a place in that school, we are getting there first. So it is what feels like a long way away, but actually that deadline for us is very tight when we start the consultations in September to finalise on the 15th of February. And as I said earlier, you don't need to apply through normal schools admissions processes if you have an EHCP. We do it by consultation. So where can you get help from? Oh, we've jumped. So where can you get help from? Well, first and foremost from your school, because at the end of the day, your school know your young person the best because they've probably worked with them for many years. They've probably been in their schools and gone through their journey with you, and so they will know your young people. If you can't get support through your school, you can always talk to us as EHCP coordinators. We want to help and we want to be able to make sure that you get as much support as possible and that the process is as smooth and clear as possible. So please note that one of the things I will say through this whole presentation is communication is key. Keep in touch with us, talk to us, we will talk to you. If we talk to each other, we understand where we're coming from, we understand the conversations and the rationale behind the decision making, and we can take those next steps together. Talk to MyAS. The reason we jointly do this presentation together is because we work closely with our colleagues in MyAS, and MyAS hold a wealth of knowledge and experience around this process and many other processes, and they are there to help. They are also independent of the local authority, and therefore we are in a position that MyAS can give advice and guidance around specific schools where your EHCP coordinators will often say to you, as a local authority officer, we have to remain neutral. However, if you pick the wrong school or we're not sure, we may pull a face. So we'll let you know somehow. But we are neutral, so we don't give advice at the level MyAS will. So use MyAS as well as part of that process. And finally, kids first. Talk to each other. Parents that have gone through this process, going through this process, you are the knowledge to each other. You are the support to each other as well. There is nothing better than talking to a parent that's been there and done it. So use Kids First as that forum as well to be able to get that advice and guidance moving forward. And that support, more importantly. We will talk about how this can be an emotional and emotive journey. So gaining the support as much as possible is really important. Thank you. So who do we consult and why? So we can consult a variety of schools, we can consult a variety of educational provisions, and this is where we are able to explain some of that in more detail. So we consult what we refer to as academies or mainstreams or special schools. So we have academies in the borough, they can be mainstreams, they can be special schools, but we consult with academies because they are part of the offer. We consult with maintained schools on it's got nursery here because that's what the law put. We're going to talk about maintained schools at secondary, but we consult with our maintained schools, which are your state-run high schools, if you like, our school-run high schools, and we can consult in and both out of borough. So we don't limit to just Merton, we consult with outside boroughs around us, and we are able to consult both specialist and maintained schools in and out of borough. We consult with non-maintained special schools. So these are our independent schools. These are our schools that maybe parents sometimes refer to as private schools, but they're independent schools, and we consult with those as well. And we consult with a school that is on what's called a Section 41 list. So when we are looking at schools, some independent non-maintained schools are on a Section 41 list, which means they are inspected in a similar way to Ofsted and the way our schools are inspected. There are some schools that are independent that are what we call non-Section 41 schools, and they are inspected under a different regime. They are inspected under an independent regime, and as a local authority, we do not have a legal requirement to consult those schools. So there may be conversations, because there are schools, I will use an example, Blossom House in the borough and around the borough, that are non-Section 41 schools. It doesn't stop you raising them as a parental preference if that's what you would like us to do, but it may be that in the initial conversations we would be saying the local authority is not agreeing to consult, as we do legally not have to. So when we're looking at those, come and talk to us, come and talk to MyAS, find out which those schools are. If you go onto the government website, www.gov.uk, and put Section 41 in schools, it will give you a list of Section 41 schools and non-Section 41 schools. So you can research yourself if that's something you wish to do. When can we consult? The LA can only refuse. So we consult with schools as a request of parents, but we can only refuse on certain grounds. So we can only refuse to consult if what we class as the setting is unsuitable for the age, aptitude, ability, or special educational need of the child or young person. So this may be if you were asking me, for instance, to consult with a highly specialist school like Perseid, which is our school for children with complex needs and severe learning difficulties, and your young person was able to do GCSEs. I may be saying that's an inappropriate consultation because that young person's SEN needs are not complex enough to go to that school, and it would be wrong to send them. We can only refuse if the attendance of the child or young person would be incompatible with the provision of the efficient education of others. So this is when we think about having your young person in that school would impact every other child in that class. It may impact them because by having them there, and maybe because their behaviours are sometimes dysregulated much higher, they would cause a distraction or a danger or a health and safety risk to somebody. It may be that by having that young person there, because they require such a differentiated curriculum, for instance, that everybody else would be taught something and your young person would be sitting separate to them, being taught a totally different curriculum and subject matter. It may be that having them there because they have to have an individual member of staff with them all the time, and having that extra person in the classroom would have an impact because there would be too many adults in the classroom. There are many, many different reasons for the inefficient education of others, but this is the one that mainstream schools, and particularly specialist schools, if they're going to go over numbers, would be considering using as a reason for not accepting a consultation. Now, we as a local authority can challenge, and we can look at that, but we have to feel very strong in our challenge that it would not impact other pupils. The other reason that we can refuse to consult is the attendance of the child or young person would be incompatible with the efficient use of resources. Always a tricky subject, because this is where we don't talk about need, we talk about money. But as a local authority manager and officer, I have a duty to ensure that the taxpayers' money is spent effectively and efficiently. And if, for instance, you would like me to place your young person in a school that's going to cost me £75,000 a year, and I have a school of a similar ability and would meet the needs of your young person and is good enough, at £15,000, I would be saying it would be inefficient to spend an additional £60,000 on that educational provision. So we will sometimes have to have those difficult conversations around the efficient education and efficient use of resources if that sometimes comes up. So it's just to be open and transparent. One of the things that you will get used to working with the team and working with me as we go through this process is we want to be open and honest and as transparent with you as possible. So that ensures that we understand, again, that rationale and decision making by the local authority in relation to the placement of your young people moving forward. And the last one is the provision is not a Section 41 school. So as I explained earlier, as local authority, we do not have to consult with schools that are not on the Section 41 list. Thank you. So we've done where we can get help, and that normally leads in, we jumped the slides a bit, but we've done it backwards, but that normally leads me into saying, but of course you can talk to Myas, and then I'm going to hand over to Fran now, who's going to give you a little bit more information about the process and where you can get that help.
Thank you, Georgie. Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for all of you coming along. For us as Myas, we're the advice and guidance service for residents in Merton. Some of you may have come across us. So this is either an introduction to us or a reminder of us. I'm just going to hold up our flyer, and Tahina, it's not coming up very well, is it? I think you've got an electronic version of this. If you could send this out with the slides, that would be great. And I just noticed a question in the chat, Georgie, which I don't know if we're going to deal with them as we go along, because this one wasn't covered by our slides. So one parent asked, for the current year 6 children, are those dates the same, just -1 year? And I think the answer is yes to that one, isn't it? Yeah, so
yes.
if your child's currently in year 6 and already has an EHCP, then the local authority has a duty to name in about 3 weeks' time. I think
we are currently working on those as we speak.
Yeah, so and some families don't necessarily have the EHCP finalised by that date, and the local authority will continue working with you. But anyway, I will get back to my bit, but I just thought it was worth picking that up in the chat. The other one, Georgie, I'll leave you to deal with that one to answer the other question. So we're Myas, we're the Merton Information Advice and Support Service for Merton residents. I'm Fran, I'm the manager, and my colleagues are also on the call as well, so they'll introduce themselves shortly. And we are here to support you with the process, to recommend schools, etc. as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the legal framework, and we'll come to that bit. You're right to go on to the next slide, Tahina. Oh, there we are. So there we are. We're a statutory function, so we're commissioned by the NHS and by the local authority, by Merton Council. So we can't say we're independent, but we can say we're impartial, which means we're what's called arm's length from the local authority. We're based at Joseph Hood Primary School. We rent an office there. So we might meet you out in the community to give you advice and guidance. We might meet you at school, or you could come and see us at the office, or at the Civic Centre in Morden, anywhere that suits you really, or obviously by telephone or virtual meeting. So as I say, I'm Fran. I provide advice and guidance for tribunals and highly complex cases, and I work full time. And I'll let Shazia and Kate introduce themselves. Shazia, have you managed to work your camera?
No, hi. No, the camera is the host has stopped it. So can you all hear me though? You can hear me though.
Yeah, can hear you. Thank
okay.
you.
Start my video. Can you see me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Shazia Khan, sorry. So I'm the Myas advisor, and I give the advice and guidance that's a bit more tailored or specialist, and I deal with the no to assess for the EHCNAs that's been refused to be assessed. I also work full-time all year round, and I also do drop-in sessions at the children's centres twice a week as part of the Family Hub. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Kate Potter. I work part-time and term time only. I triage all the new referrals coming into our service. I man the phones usually 9:30 till 12:30 every day. So if you call, then you'll most likely speak to me. I manage the Myas inbox, so you might hear from me initially. I'm able to give some initial advice and guidance, and I do a lot of work around schools. So yeah, if people want to, we'll discuss later in the session, but I can give advice around schools that might be able to meet your child's needs.
Lovely, thank you. And that's our flyer, which again, you can't see too well, but we have a flyer about the drop-ins, which Tahina will send around to you if that's all right, Tahina, with the slides. We give advice and guidance on education, social care and health. So obviously for the purpose of today, I'm sure you're all focused on the education side of things, but we also give advice and guidance on that. And we do a lot of signposting and we're an empowerment service. So the idea is hopefully we give you the advice and guidance or tell you the information you need to know, and then you can go off and find out your own information. But we are here to support you in meetings and things if necessary. So just give you an idea of our service. We still, I mean, Kate, it's felt like it's been a bit more than 8 and 10 phone calls. That's sort of our average. But from time to time, we do get very busy. But you'll see our waiting list is approximately 2 weeks to speak to myself or Shazia. But you do have the option of going to our drop-in. And as Kate said, she also gives some advice and guidance if you speak to her on the phone. So hopefully, if you do contact us either by phone or email, you'll get a response from Kate pretty quickly. And if it's during the school holidays, Shazia and I aren't quite as efficient as Kate, but we try to live up to her standard that she sets. If you leave a message, we actually get an email with a transcript of your call, so we will come back to you. So please do bear with us. Sometimes we do get terribly busy. And we will prioritise cases which involve safeguarding issues and appeals. So that will sort of come to later, but we support up to and including appeals as well. And sometimes you might have a deadline. So when you leave us a message or email us, do let us know about that. We offer telephone appointments as well, and we can arrange, as I've said, face-to-face meetings and attend meetings if it's essential for you to have us there with you. Thanks, Tahina. So this was just sort of quite a useful visual. I don't know how you're all feeling at the moment, but quite a lot of parents at this stage are feeling maybe a bit overwhelmed. It's quite a lot to think about, particularly if it's your oldest one moving into secondary school. So hopefully this sort of breaks it down a bit from our MyAS side of things. So first of all, as Georgie said, you'll be looking at your EHCP through your annual review. And remember, after the annual review, you get another 15 days to comment on your EHCP. So if you haven't managed to do everything or say everything you want to say in your annual review, or things have changed, you will get another opportunity when the local authority sends you the draft to do that. For example, when was the last EP report? Do you feel it's up to date? The local authority will be looking at this as well. And the bit that really you own, if you like, is the Part A. So you and the young person in your family are entitled to write whatever you like in your Part A, which is the first part of the EHCP. So hopefully you all know what I mean by that. But if you look at your EHCP, each section is given a letter. And Part A is basically what you filled in when you first applied for an EHCP. So it could be that needs updating. Just bear in mind that your young person will be reading this at some stage, and they may not appreciate some of the details that are being shared, and just try and see it through their eyes a little bit, and maybe even ask them to read a little bit of it. I mean, obviously you can judge yourselves, and it depends on their communication needs. So you might be doing visits to schools, talking to your friends, family, professionals who are involved, and we'll talk a bit about that. Kate will talk a bit about that later on. Then you're going to have your Year 5 annual review, or you've had it already. So at that stage, the local authority will update your EHCP in line with their statutory timescales. Then you're going to give your parental preferences towards the end of summer. Don't worry too much if the letter, is it still a letter, Georgie, from the local authority? Do you send it by post or by email?
It's a letter that will be emailed.
Emailed.
To the majority of families, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll get one of those encrypted, a message to say you've got mail, so to speak, from the local authority, and that will be your letter. So let's say that arrives on the 1st of August, because it's a mail shot, it takes a while for them to actually arrive in your inboxes from our experience. The local authority will be open to talking to you about having a bit extra time to think about your parental preference, as I understand it, because obviously in the school holidays, you might not be able to speak to the people you need to speak to, or visit the schools you want to visit. And then the LA then consults, and the schools in theory have 15 days to reply, but often take longer. Sometimes they're very quick. It all depends on what's happening in the school, the type of school, etc., and what arrangement they follow in terms of consultations. And then, all being well, the school is named in your EHCP, you have a new EHCP, and you will also have your Year 6 annual review as well. So the annual review process keeps going alongside this as well. Thanks, Tahina. So just a bit of more information about MIAS and how we work. So the majority of our service users, that's the children and young people, have a diagnosis of autistic spectrum disorder. We prefer condition, which is quite a high number compared to the EHCP population. We signpost regularly to the Merton Autism Parents Service, to other support services, as I've mentioned. So we may not know the answer, but we'll hopefully know an organisation that can help or support you. We don't double up. So if you already have an advisor, some of you might employ, hopefully you won't have to do this, employ a lawyer or another advocate. We generally don't remain involved and give our advice and guidance just so it's confusing for you. And I think I've said this before in other sessions, but in the situation where I did stay involved, it was very confusing for the parents. So it's easier for you just to have one source of advice and guidance. We do support up to and including appeals. So I don't know how many of you know, but if you disagree with the school that the local authority has named, you have a right of appeal. And that would be to what's called the SENDIS Tribunal, and it's called the First Tier Tribunal. So you may have heard some of those words. And we support up to and including lodging the appeal and representing you if you're unable to represent yourself. But fortunately in Merton, they have a fairly low level of tribunals. One of the successes, I think, of MIAS being able to help families is because we do try and hold Merton true to their word of being collaborative and wanting to hear from parents. And they generally, I find the managers are very open to meeting with families who disagree with the decision, if only so you can understand that decision and make your decision about what to do next on the basis of what they say. We also regularly liaise with the LA and Health, so we can escalate cases where you, with your consent, or where there are concerns in general about how the system's working, if you like, and that would be on an anonymous basis. So we're a confidential service. We're for parents and carers, for young people as well. So we may have some young people who themselves have questions. And if you're struggling to answer those questions, or the school is, we're happy to meet with them as well as part of a Teams call or whatever suits them. And we don't have access to any of your records. So unless you send us your information, or the local authority sends it to us, then we won't have access to that. And the local authority in turn doesn't have access to our casework database. You can also speak to us anonymously. We do have families and professionals contacting us from time to time saying we don't want to give the details, but can we just ask this question, and that's absolutely fine with us. Thanks, Tahina. Right, so this is a little bit about the law. So there is a comfort break. We should have said this at the beginning, actually, Tahina, shouldn't we? There's a comfort break after this, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So I think it seemed like quite a good place to put it. So what I'm going to do now, just give you a quick overview of the law, just so that you know the legal framework. I'm not expecting any of you to remember any of this, and this is the most complex area of law. So this is where we give a lot of our advice and guidance to the families who are struggling for whatever reason with either the school the local authority wants to name, or they want a different school, and this is the legal framework we'll be looking at. So Georgie's already explained. Is there anything in the chat, by the way, Tahina? Are you watching that?
Yes, there's a few people asking for these slides. So I'll be emailing to I'll be responding to general questions like that. But I will flag it up if there's anything specific maybe you or George can answer.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so as Georgie's explained, first of all, the local authority has a legal duty to put in place full-time education for your young person or child. So that's their primary legal duty, and they do that by consulting with the schools. So this is consulting as opposed to naming. I think there's two kind of quite new phrases in some ways if it's a new EHCP for you. So the local authority can only refuse to consult, as George has explained, If the setting is unsuitable, the attendance of the child will be incompatible. And it's a very odd phrase, but you'll see it several times in the law. So there's various elements of the law which apply here, and you'll see this it's quite a clumsy phrase, I think, but it is the one we're living with. It is from the statute. And the attendance of the child will be incompatible with the efficient use of resources, and that includes all costs, including transport. So if you think of that as the duty to the public purse, the last one, and then the one in the middle is the duty to the school to manage all the education of all the students in their school, that might be helpful. So that's the section of the law that it's set out in, and the LA has to prove. So they have to show you that one of those conditions applies, to not consult with your preference. So where you're giving one preference, just bear that in mind. You know, it could be a very short conversation. If you give an independent school, for example, that's a non-Section 41 school, the local authority might just refuse to consult. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking about your options. So we've talked through the types of schools you can request. So a maintained school or nursery, mainstream or special, and that's maintained by the local authority. So under the local authority control, if you like. An academy, which is outside of the local authority's control, but actually has to comply with a lot of the other legal requirements. A non-maintained special school and a Section 41 school, but the LA doesn't have to consult with any others. So these are the only ones the local authority you're allowed to insist that the local authority consults with. And so that might be where some of you might be interested in schools which are in the independent sector and they don't fall with any of those categories. And that's where some of this law that we're going to talk about may become relevant. But sometimes the local authority themselves might ring you up and say, actually, we don't think these schools have said they can't meet needs. We're going to go into the independent sector. So sometimes it can happen that way as well. Thanks, Tahina. So there's so we've got the right to consult, and if any of those right for you to request consultation, if any of those schools say yes, the local authority has to name them. So it could be a very quick, easy process. And I think, Georgie, I'm right in saying that out of the 170 odd EHCPs at the moment who are due to have a secondary school named for September 2026, the majority will go into mainstream.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The majority are going to mainstream, and obviously we do know that there are a cohort of children that go from mainstream to special at secondary because of the setup of our schools in our nurturing primaries, but obviously secondaries become much bigger, much larger, and much more challenging. So, but yes, the majority of our children follow their path.
Going to mainstream. Yeah, so hopefully not all of you are going to need to contact us with any worries or concerns, because the majority, might move from mainstream to mainstream, and it may be a particular mainstream you're interested in, and we'll cover that a bit later. So if you feel that you want a mainstream school named in your EHCP and the local authority is saying they don't think that's going to be the case, then there's also an extra bit of the law that says that a child must be educated in a mainstream setting unless it's against the child's parents' wishes, or it's incompatible with the efficient education of others, and the LA shows there are no reasonable steps that it could take to prevent the incompatibility. So you may go to the local authority and say, I disagree with what this school has said about why they can't meet my needs. And the local authority might go to that school and say, actually, the way you framed your refusal, or you're saying you can't meet needs, is not lawful, and we want you to come back to us and we want to discuss this further with you. So it could be that the local authority is doing that on your behalf. Even if the local authority successfully argues that the mainstream school can't meet needs, sorry, something's just popped up. There we are. Because of those reasons that we've talked about before, and they wanted to name a special school against your wishes, you would also have to show that it was incompatible with the provision of efficient education of others. So what this is maybe hopefully showing you is that there's various elements of the law that you can draw on depending on your particular circumstances. And that's why it's important that you get this advice and guidance so you know which element of the law applies to you. But there's a right to mainstream education, but not to a particular school. So if the LA decides that they are that they can just name a type in the EHCP. So by February the 15th, the local authority could say, we've not been able to identify a school, but we know what type we would like. So, for example, the local authority may finalise the plan naming a maintained mainstream school. That would then give you a right of appeal if you disagreed with that decision, or it would mean that the local authority would continue consulting with mainstream schools, but at least there was an agreement as to what type of school that was going to be. So again, in this, I often think disability discrimination and requirement to make reasonable adjustments. The mainstream schools have quite a high duty to show that there's nothing they can do to ensure that a child can attend their school. Thanks, Tahina. So independent schools. So I don't know, could I just have a show of hands? How many of you are interested in this particular part? Because I don't want to overwhelm you with a whole load of information. Does anybody? I'll run over it quickly because it may be difficult for you to know, but if you do feel that the only school that can meet your child's needs is an independent school, then you have to prove that to the local authority. So you would be saying, yeah, I'll come back to you about the grammar school. Yeah, that the answer to that is yes. And I'll tell you what I give to parents as advice and guidance when they ask me that question. Then Georgie can tell me if I'm right or wrong. So in independent schools, the local authority, in addition to the other two legal parts we've just looked at, the local authority must have regard to the general principle that pupils are to be educated in accordance with the wishes of their parents. So this is another legal duty on the local authority, and this is about parental choice, isn't it? But again, we've got this slightly clumsy phrase, unless so far as that is compatible with the provision of efficient instruction and training, very old-fashioned wording from the Education Act 1996, and the avoidance of unreasonable public expenditure. And bear in mind that when we're looking at unreasonable public expenditure, that's all the costs, and some of the costs of transport are maybe more expensive than the cost of the placement themselves. So if you have two schools and they both have said they can meet needs, if you've persuaded the local authority to consult with them, and then you can go to local authority and say, we are willing to transport our child to our school of choice, or come to some other agreement with the local authority about the costs, then it could be that the local authority is open to naming that independent school. But just remember, with independent schools, they can serve notice on the local authority in a way that the other types of schools that we listed before can't. Oh, Georgie, thank you. You've already covered that one. I'll still say what I say to parents just to make sure, because I only said it to a parent the other day. So if a child or young person requests one of those schools that Georgie and I have listed, then the local authority must consult with them unless the exceptions apply. And if the local authority refuses to name that school, so let's say the local authority consults, and like Georgie said at the beginning, your very clear parental preference, for example, is Rutlish, and Rutlish says yes, then the local authority has to name that school, basically, and everybody's happy. But if it's the other way around, that you want to ask for an independent setting, you have to prove as parents that none of the schools the local authority is offering can meet the child's or young person's needs, and that's where the duty to the public purse might come in. So I hope that hasn't thoroughly confused all of you and you've got a little bit of understanding of the legal framework. But as you can see, it is complicated and there isn't a test at the end of this. And if you want to test me, go ahead, but I may not be able to answer everything. So just on the grammar school point, I think we had this question, didn't we, Kate and Shazia, at the we had a face-to-face session. I think that was right, wasn't it? Yeah. And absolutely, the local authority can consult with grammar schools, but the child has to be able to pass the academic selection test that most of them have. I think all of them do. But you can ask for reasonable adjustments to be made when your child's going to be sitting those tests. So some children might need to be in a separate room. I'm not sure about how grammar schools feel about scribes. I think that might be difficult for some of them, but it could be that your child's entitled to extra time or an extra level of supervision to enable them to sit those tests. So I hope that helps. And is that okay, Georgie? That's broadly what we say.
Absolutely. I think the only other condition that comes into it, as you spoke briefly on, is transport, obviously, because it would be that if we felt that we could meet needs at a mainstream school nearer and there were significant transport costs that were incurred by going to the grammar school, we may be having those conversations about independent travel and that young person not gaining transport but still going to that school. But we do have to think about the transport costs as well. Yeah,
lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Tahina. So I think the next slide is a bit, so this is a little bit of a summary of about us. And as I said, after the comfort break, Shazia is going to talk to you a bit about child and young person voice, and Kate's going to talk to you a bit about research in schools, but we can help. I hope you've got that message from today. We can support you up to and including appeals, but we don't double up. So some families, we will go so far with them and then they will appoint a lawyer, and that's absolutely not a problem, and then they'll come back to us afterwards. So, but at that stage, we would close the case. At the moment, in terms of going to tribunal, it's currently taking up to 12 months for hearings. So if you are thinking that you're going to need to challenge the local authority, just bear that in mind. And whilst you're waiting for that hearing date, the local authority doesn't have a duty to put in place education. Now, the tribunal is very mindful of this, and they do keep hearing dates to one side for what's called phase transfer cases, which are ones who are moving from one phase of education to another, which would apply here. But still, by the time you've been through the various legal processes that you need to do for the local authority to prove their case and for you to prove yours, it still is probably going to take up to 12 months, hopefully slightly less. But remember, you can also request an early interim review. So it could be that you and the local authority and maybe the school are really not sure, but you think it's a good fit. So sometimes it's about thinking of the good enough school. And as we've talked about before, you know, children change during year 6, things can move on. You know, children newly arrive in the borough, so it could be that you move boroughs and you're falling into that bracket where you maybe don't know the area that well, you don't know the schools that well, and there's a real hope that the school is going to meet needs and be successful, but you're just not absolutely sure and you'd like to have the opportunity to review that decision. You can also request a review once the school, once your child's been attending the school for a period of time to allow the school to get to know them. And then if the school at that stage is saying, look, we really think we might not be the right place, then they can have another discussion with the local authority. Do visit the school if you can. There's some great videos on websites now because of COVID. I don't like to say outside of COVID, but it does mean that we are all a lot more technically. I mean, us just doing this online presentation would not have happened well, certainly not with my IT skills anyway. And so the schools do have lots of good videos, and Kate's going to talk about that a little bit. Speak to your child as well. Your child can have some interesting opinions on most things. And I think on this particular topic, things like all boys school versus all girls versus mixed, the area, travel. So Kate's going to talk about some of that. So Shazia, after the break, is going to talk to you, give you some top tips about hearing your child's voice, etc. So I think we're going to have a break now, aren't we? And it's landed up almost squarely in the middle, Tahina.
Lovely. Thank you. So yeah, the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a bit from the SEND Code of Practice, whether they're going through the annual review process or whether they're going through the EHCP process. Just take that off. So the local authorities must ensure that children, their parents and young people are involved in discussions and decisions about their individual support and about local provision. Early years providers, schools and colleges should also take steps to ensure that young people and parents are actively supported in contributing to needs assessments, developing and reviewing EHCP plans, and to ensure the child's parents or the young person are fully included in the EHC needs assessment process from the start, and they're fully aware of their opportunities to offer views and information and are consulted about the content of the plan. Thank you. So the annual reviews is a request for updated information, particularly around the Year 5 annual review. You have to make sure all the information is updated because this is the plan that will be going out to the schools for consults. So the host of the annual review, mainly in schools, they gather the views, wishes and feelings from the child and young person. And they should include their views of the current arrangements and provide an opportunity to discuss changes with the child or young person that may want to be made to the EHCP. So these reports are usually sent out 2 weeks of the request being made. The Children and Families Act expects the annual review meeting to be conducted in a person-centred way focused on the child or young person's voice. So the same Code of Practice states reviews must be undertaken in partnership with the child and their parent or the young person, and must take into account of their views, wishes and feelings. Thank you. So whatever format the meeting takes place, maybe the child or young person could be asked what they prefer. It must enable full involvement of the parent, child or young person, consider their views, wishes and feelings, especially when making decisions. So if the child, young person is not confident to sit in the meeting to share their voice, there's other ways of doing it. They can prepare something beforehand. They can do a presentation, a video, write something. So there's different ways of getting their voice across in the meeting. The parent and child view ideally is required to be distributed. Sorry, messages coming up. To all invitees 2 weeks before the annual review, along with copies of updated reports. And you can always add additional views if you don't get a chance to do that in the meeting afterwards. When the draft is sent out, you have 15 days to respond. You can also share your views then. Thank you. Just moving away from the annual review process, this is more about the child and young person's voice. It's just a short video, why it's important to hear their voice. So I just wanted to share this video with you. Thanks.
Sorry, please bear with me.
I hope it works.
It worked before the meeting.
It did.
Article 12 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child states, "I have the right to be listened to and taken seriously."
Listening is not just hearing, but also understanding what someone is saying.
When I cry, I'm talking to you.
When I fall silent, I'm talking to you.
When I'm naughty, I'm talking to you. When I don't do my homework, I'm talking to you.
When I laugh, I'm talking to you. But are you listening?
It's your legal responsibility to listen to me so that my voice matters. It gives me a chance to express what I'm thinking and how I feel.
But it's not just your job to listen and to act on what you hear. It's my right to be heard, and it's also your job to explain that to me.
What's stopping you from listening is the excuses that you're too busy. It's the idea that my voice holds less validity than yours, because you're the adult. It's not my fault if listening to me and working with me to help me understand what's happening slows things down for you.
The consequences of not listening are not just causing me to lose confidence in my own voice. Not listening leaves me vulnerable.
I might hurt myself or run away because I'm scared. What if I get into danger because you didn't take time to listen to something that you should have?
I listen to others to show that as one person to another, they have my respect and I care about what they have to say.
I believe that the best way to be listened to is to listen to other people.
When I'm not listened to, it makes me feel insignificant. It gives me the impression that my voice doesn't matter and that I have no role to play in the future of my own life.
Give me time to open up and share with you.
Sometimes my voice needs influence. Help me with this.
When you find new ways to hear, you hear new things.
Give me an opportunity to share my voice with others, and when I can't, share my voice for me. If I can't talk or choose not to, then you legally become my advocate.
Listening to other people opens up my perspective.
Regardless of whether we agree or disagree.
I feel like I've helped them to know what they say counts.
When I feel listened to, I feel respected and I feel cared for.
It helps me to trust you with what I say and helps us work together. Show respect for each other, create a safe space to talk and listen where you and I feel equal.
I may be young, but we can stand shoulder to shoulder.
Ask me what I want. I need your support and someone to help me fight my corner. Tell me what your decision will be before you go ahead with it.
Explain how this affects my life and tell me how the things I've shared helped you make this decision.
Don't keep secrets from me. It's my life you're talking about. I might not understand everything yet, but I'm the one living it.
Thanks, Tina.
One moment. There you go.
Brilliant. Okay, so just some top tips for sharing your views for your annual review. So do remember, sorry, can I make the screen a bit bigger? Sorry.
Yes, let me see if I can. Sorry, let me just go back into them, see if I can do that. Has that helped at all?
Sorry, I'm going to turn my camera off so I can put my face right next to the camera. Thanks. So do remember that you can give your views in any way that you feel comfortable. Remember that these are your views. Everyone else will get a chance to share their views as well. So do remember that you can ask someone to help you write your views, share anything that is going well, and share anything that is not going well, and then share any goals and ambitions you have for the future. And don't let anyone stop you from sharing your views. You've got the right to be involved in your annual review. Thanks. And then just some ideas of what sort of views you can be sharing. So what's going well at the school, and then what's not going well at the school, and then what would be useful to have at school that you don't have now. And just talk about your goals, ambitions, aspirations for the next 5 years, so we can focus on those goals. That's great. Thank you.
Hi, I said at the top of the presentation that I do a lot of work around supporting parents with schools. So I just wanted to share a few top tips for researching schools. Give the next slide, please. Lovely. Yeah, these are just some things that I think you need to take into consideration when researching schools and considering what might be a good secondary school for your young person. Firstly, consider the school journey and how long will that journey actually take in rush hour traffic, not just, you know, how long Google Maps say it will take, you know, late in the evening. How long will that journey actually take? And you might need to do a dummy run of that in the rush hour traffic. Consider how your young person will cope with the journey. For some young people, an hour's journey stuck in traffic will mean they turn up to school in a very dysregulated state. And is that something that you know want for your young person? How is the journey going to affect them? I think you need to take that into consideration. We talked to parents about aiming for independence. If you're able to if a local school is a better, might be a good option if your young person might be able to do that journey independently. You know, they might not be able to do that independently in year 7, but they might be able to work up to doing that journey independently later on in their school life. And just there's social aspects as well. We've been able to, you know, walk to school with friends and walk back from school, and you know, it builds their social skills. So if you can aim for independence, that's always a good thing. We also speak to parents about the benefits of sending your child to a school that might be local, just in terms of the social network that they can build. So you know that on the weekends and the holidays, there's more likely to be pupils from their class who live more locally. There's more opportunity for meeting up with friends at the weekend and holidays, whereas you know if they're traveling an hour to school and pupils they might be meeting at that school are from an hour in the other direction, you can see how it's difficult to have that social network when they're not at school. Second thing is around open days. So schools on their websites and on Merton's on the local authority website will advertise for mainstream schools when all the open days are coming up. Viewing special schools can be a little bit trickier just because it can be very disruptive for those pupils in special schools to have parents coming round. So I would look at, for special schools, look at their websites, contact the school and ask what their policy is around open days and coming to view the school. I mean, for the mainstream secondary schools, most of those open days will happen within 3 weeks between, mid-September to mid-October. But if you haven't been to see any of the mainstream secondary schools, I would contact the school. Sometimes, that school might have quite a few inquiries and they might, put on at their discretion an extra like open morning and show around some parents. So I would look at websites, see when open days are coming up, but also contact individual schools and just see if you can go and have a look around. Another thing I would look at on schools' websites is the curriculum. So all the schools' websites have a section where they'll detail the curriculum. Quite a few schools have differing curriculum pathways. I'm talking largely about special schools here. So Whatley campus, for instance, has 2 pathways. So one's called Whatley, one's called Wandle, and one's called Thames pathway. And the curriculum is differentiated along those different pathways. So you can see actually, oh, my child might be able to manage, a particular pathway within a school. Point number 4 is consider the post-16 option. Not all schools, mainstream or specialist, might not have a post-16 option or provision. So, how would your child or young person feel then again about moving on to another educational setting? So it's just something to bear in mind. And the last point is that MIAS can help you with this. So this is something that I quite often do. Once you've had your year 5 annual review and you've got all the paperwork back from that and that's all been finalised, you can send us a copy of the EHCP. Please bear in mind that when you send that to us, it's not a secure link. So if you want it sent securely, just let me know and I can ask Merton Council to send it over to us. And I can give you some information about schools that may be able to meet your child's needs. So we'll have a read of the EHCP and their needs and what provision they require. And I can send you back a list then of schools that may be able to meet that need, just to help you narrow down your search. And on the next slide is, so these are all the boroughs that surround Merton. So you can apply, you can give your preference for a school that's out of borough, but bear in mind what Georgie and Fran have talked about travel costs and etc. But these are links to websites where you can find information about what schools are in Kingston Borough, for example. That's the ARP schools and also the special schools. So you can have a little look and see what's the boroughs. And I think this is over to you, Fran, I think, for the summary.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Kate. So a bit of a summary of kind of some of our thoughts, reading the papers, reading the EHCP, do ask professionals when you're in meetings or the school or somebody at the school that you trust, and ask us if you don't understand anything in there. I think myself and Sharjah, and I think Kate, you have as well, where a parent's not actually been able to read through their EHCP because they can have very complex language and be talking about quite emotional subjects as well. Ask the network around your child. As Georgie said, your EHCP coordinators can't name schools, but sometimes the teachers or the senior leadership team at the school might be happy to do that, but you'd have to ask and just say, are there any schools you would think of? And that's giving them permission really to give you their opinions. Be positive. Everyone picks up on parental anxiety. We certainly feel it in the office sometimes when we speak to you on the phone and we come to meetings. We know this is a really tricky time, But it's also an exciting opportunity for our young people to move into another setting, to access a different curriculum and maybe be supported by different people with different specialisations, and endings are as important as beginnings. Your child's voice needs to be listened to. Hopefully, through this presentation, you've heard how important the child and young person voice is, and they do benefit from feeling listened to, obviously. I mean, it sounds quite obvious, but when you're dealing with a year 6 child, it's kind of the beginning of their journey of starting to have their voice heard, hopefully, and getting used to that, because come to year 9, we'll start talking about preparation for adulthood outcomes, etc., and it'll be very key then. Be open-minded. Yep, children change and grow up a lot. And the last bit that I said, I think feels like ages ago now, but at the beginning of this presentation about looking at your Part A through your children's eyes, they'll be reading this. Would they be happy with you sharing that? You know, teaching them about data protection, etc., and keeping personal information confidential. And I don't think we've mentioned travel training, have we, Georgie? Don't think that's come up yet. So there is the preparation for adulthood outcomes is an obligation on the local authority and professionals to start thinking about preparing a young person or child for adulthood. And often part of that is independence in travelling, and there is Merton Mencap offers a way of helping young people to become independent. So that's something to bear in mind if you are thinking about transport as well. And also, it's interesting, Kate, you saying about the young people having that long journey in rush hour traffic, which is absolutely the case. There's one young person I supported who used to use it as his time to catch up with all his friends and kind of decompress from school. So it really does come down to the individual personality sometimes of the child, and that's really what it's all about, listening to their voice, isn't it? So we can personalise it to them where we can. Lovely, thanks, Tahina. So questions and how to find us. So there's our contact details, and Tahina, I'll send you our flyer and our leaflets. You've got that. Got our landline answered by Kate most mornings. Our email, which we all look at. Our casework is recorded on the confidential and paperless database. So we don't even have. It's quite difficult now in terms of actually taking notes, isn't it, Kate and Shazia, of what to do with them once we have them. And we do welcome feedback. So do let me know. Let us know any feedback, because we do feed that back to our funders, who we're always asking for money from them. And thank you very much for listening. Hope you found it very helpful.
Thank you. I'm just going to pause the should we go straight on to your part, Georgie, or do you think?
Absolutely, that's fine. I'm just answering some questions in the chat as we go along, so bear with me while I try and do 2 things at once, because that's not my forte. So, as Brian said, there's lots of information there about the journey, about thinking about the schools you would like. But I will be honest and say sometimes we might disagree. Sometimes there may be evidence that is suggesting a particular type or a particular school. And sometimes as a parent, you may have a different view to that. It may be that we are thinking about a particular school and you may want another one. So what can we do if we do disagree? As I said at the beginning, the key thing for me throughout this whole journey is for us to talk to each other and keep talking to each other and keep communicating. So talk to your coordinator in the LA and discuss your concerns and worries. Discuss why you disagree with us. Have those open conversations with us. We want to be as open and transparent about our decision making. We will be that way with you as well. You can appeal through the SEND tribunal process. So Fran has mentioned the SEND tribunal process, the first tier tribunal process, if you don't agree with the LA and the decision they've made. So this might be in the fact that we've named a school. You can only appeal once we issue you with the final EHCP. So if you're thinking about the fact of appealing against the naming of a school, we need to name that school finally in your plan, and then you can appeal that you say, no, I would like a different school, or I feel this school is not appropriate because. If you're concerned about the contents of the EHCP, Section F and Section B, the provision and the identification of need, you can appeal through the SEND tribunal with the final plan. You can also ask for what's called formal mediation. So of any disagreement is that we do use global mediation, and you can ask for formal mediation with the local authority. Now, I'm always willing, as many of you know, because we've worked for long periods of time. I've probably worked with many of you over the last few years, but I'm always open for a conversation and an informal mediation for us to have a chat about things, to try and work through what's happening, why we may have a disagreement. But if you want to formalise that, you can do through global mediation. That would mean we would have an independent mediator in the room with ourselves, with yourselves, with the local authority. We may have the school there if there's queries around the school. If it's a challenge to a new school, we may have the new school there, but it can be done through formal mediation as well. But I think that at this point in time, what I would say is we may have some challenges, we may have some disagreements, we may come to a decision as a local authority based on the evidence that you may not agree with. But if we talk to each other and understand that journey, most of the time we can sort those disagreements out, and most of the time we can move forward very positively. But of course, that always means that if we can't, there is a level of support there through the tribunal or through mediation that can support you as families as well going forward. We talked a little bit, and Kate's touched on these, but I think it's really good to know what are the maintain options and what the schools are in the borough. Most of the high schools in maintained high schools, you will know as parents, but it could be Rutlish, it could be Rains Park, it could be Harris Morden, it could be Harris Wimbledon, Harris Merton. We've also got Ursuline and Wimbledon College. There's a variety of secondary mainstream schools that are available within the borough, Rickards. But within those mainstream schools, we also have ARPs, we have communication ARPs as well. But we also have our specialist schools. So we have Cricket Green, for instance, which is our school for moderate learning children with difficulties aged 4 to 19. We have Perseid, which is our children's our school for children with complex and severe learning difficulties from 3 to 19. We have Melrose, Kate's touched on this, has 2 campuses, our Melrose Primary and Secondary for children with primary need of social and emotional and mental health needs, and our Melrose Watley of children that have diagnosis of ASD, social communication and SCMH as well. We have our bases, as I started to touch on earlier, and these are provisions within mainstream schools. So within our Rains Park High School, we have a base for our young people with ASD. This is a mixed school and it goes from 11 till 19. Rutlish has our base for children that have speech, language and communication needs. Again, 11 to 19, these are our secondary schools. We have Rickards, which is our girls' school that has the speech, language and communication needs base. So they are our bases in relation to Merton schools. But again, if you go on to neighbouring local authority boroughs, there are bases within schools within Kingston, Sutton, Wandsworth, Croydon that you can consider as well. So that brings us to the end of the information session today that we wanted to share with you. I think probably there's been some questions in the chat.